Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
And I'm Mark Tucker, and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Good to see you again, Mark.
Same, likewise. How are you?
Pretty good, keeping busy. I feel like I say that every week.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I feel like I do too. So maybe because it's busy and there's lots going on. So
Yeah, no, and it's I keep busy with work stuff, with lots of the voice lunch stuff. I have office hours every week, which is great. People show up there and ask all sorts of questions. And that's actually, it reminds me of a question that I got at a recent office hours that at a recent voice lunch, we were talking about multimodal voice communication. And the question I got at voice lunch, and this is from JT, who often asks fantastic questions.
yes.
So shout out to you, JT. He asked, what do we mean when we talk about modalities and multimodalities? And is this a real term, or did we just kind of make it up out of thin air? Or, but what do we mean when we talk about modalities? And I thought it was a good question that maybe we should share with the rest of the Two Voice Devs audience.
Yeah. So when I first came across the term multimodal, it was when Alexa very first came out with their first Echo Show smart display device. And they were talking about that you would have voice and you would have display. And it was a voice first with augmented with display, and they called it multimodal. Mm-hmm. And so, to me, in the voice world, it has always seemed to be like when you're talking about smart displays, then it's talking about multimodal. Yep. How about you?
I remember back when the Assistant first launched, it indicated what possible modalities there were, because you could interact with the Assistant using a keyboard on a mobile device, mm-hmm. or it could be via your voice with audio. So it initially had this notion of how did the input come in? And then eventually also, since output could also go to a mobile device, where is what possible output options did you have? Did you just have a speaker, just have audio, mm-hmm. or did you also have a screen? And since then, it's kind of expanded in a couple of different ways, but those concepts have maintained the same of, modality basically meaning where is the input coming from? How is the input coming in? Or what options did you have of the input coming in? And what options do you have for the output going out?
Now, before we jump into a little bit more, kind of the term that I had heard before that I had sort of associated with multimodal was like form factors. You talk about like, oh, this phone is this certain form factor. Here's a phone that's a certain size, or that's got mm-hmm. a smart screen. It was a smartphone versus a I can't even remember what they called them before.
BlackBerry.
Or BlackBerry, or even like phones that were just phones. I don't believe. That's just kind of blows your mind.
The feature phones.
Feature phones. Yeah, I think those.
As opposed to smartphones. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. What's your experience with the term form factor? Did that shadow your opinion of multimodal at all, or?
That's a good point, because when I think about form factor, it also included things like, were you on a desktop versus a laptop?
Yeah.
I heard form factor being referred to there. And some of that also carried connotations of what the screen size was and what the keyboard mm-hmm. limitations might be or might not be. So, did your keyboard have a numeric keypad on it or not? That was part of the form factor. I think when we talk about modalities, we are more specifically focusing about the different kinds of media that we can be using. So I think it's a good question. I think they're related, but I think it's a little bit more, when we talk about modalities, it's a little bit narrower.
Yeah. So, because I have all kinds of different options when it comes to smart speakers or things that are, maybe aren't necessarily a smart speaker. Like my Flex isn't really a smart speaker. It's my nightlight that's got a Alexa in it. And that's different versus like I've got lots of different size of Echo Show screen devices. There's the 5 and the 8 and the 10 and the 15 and
right. And when we start talking about things like a Fire TV stick or a Chromecast device, those are maybe that would be more of a form factor than a modality.
Yeah.
But when we talk about a car, is
Echo
that
Auto or
is that a different modality? I don't know. That's a good question.
So no, it's just
now you've got me thinking.
This term is a little bit fuzzy, right? It's no wonder some people are like,
are confused by it.
Yeah, it's confusing, or just like, can you talk about that a little bit more? Because in some ways I think I'm confused too, or because there hasn't been anything that I've seen specifically say this is this is what modality is. But we also talk about so in some cases it's to me it's like, well, what does the what, like you say, well, what's the input, what's the output? So, and that could indicate, because I know that with Alexa presentation language, APL, you get information on this is the type of device and it's a pixel and it supports touch. But like if I'm using that same APL screen on the TV, then the thing that I'm using isn't touching the screen. It's this remote control that I can talk into or navigate to select things. And so I still get things like highlights on the TV, but highlighting a specific control on a normal hub device doesn't make sense because I'm tapping the screen.
Right. And when we're talking about things like Bixby capsules, we're talking about which template will get used.
Yeah.
Whether we're on, a mobile device or a refrigerator or a speaker, so.
Or TV or whatever.
So, right. So that kind of factors in the same way. So I would say, broadly speaking, though, for our conversation, let's kind of look at modality in terms of the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not what is the screen size, what is the pixel density. It's more, broadly speaking, what kinds of big communication features do we have? Do we have voice input? Do we have voice output?
Right.
Do we have keyboard input? Do we have visual output? Because those, broadly speaking, kind of change the nature of how we will choose to communicate.
Yeah, and so it could also be settings, because I'm trying to think about, like, if you think about your different senses, right? You can hear, you can see, you can touch. So far, we haven't had taste or smell.
I don't want a smellable assistant. No.
Or tasteable assistant. Yeah. It's the old Bugs Bunny, smell-o-vision replaces television.
Yep.
Don't want that.
Oh, I hope we don't go there.
But it is interesting because is it direct tactile touch, or is it through a keyboard or through something else?
And that's touch on the input. There's also haptics. So we're talking about touch on the output as well in some cases, which I don't think the assistants are really addressing right now.
Yep.
But that's certainly the kind of modality that we might talk about in the future.
Yeah. And it's interesting because even with the touch and the voice on an Echo Show display, then there's also accessibility mode where you can then launch a skill with touch as opposed to having to say. So then it's like, well, how much of a skill experience should be expected if you're in accessibility mode? So it's just interesting.
Well, it's also an interesting case on the assistant on mobile. If you invoke the assistant via and talk to it via the keyboard, right, then the assistant won't actually produce any audio because it assumes you're in a scenario where you can't speak.
So it turns into kind of more of a chat bot.
So it turns into it, right. And one of the important things is to be able to know or to figure out that you're in that mode, because then you might respond differently.
Yeah.
If I know that the user isn't talking to me, they're typing at me, I may choose to use different words. I may choose to not depend on, audio cues
Yep.
because you're not going to hear them. I may choose to be more explicit in what I say because you're reading it as opposed to hearing. And similarly, when I'm dealing, if I know I've got a screen device, I may choose to say something and to show you an abbreviated version because, if you're glancing at it, you'll glance at it differently, or to show you a graphic image and describe that graphic image at the same time.
Yeah. And even if you have a screen device, there could be, situations where you're close to the device. And so, and that's why it's important to have a solid voice experience and not depend on just the display experience, because just because you have a screen doesn't mean that you're looking at it or that you're, close to it. So
there's a lot of design arguments about that
yes.
these days. So I'll be honest, I fall into the same camp as you do. I feel like designing good visual experiences with voice means that you still need to have a really good audio experience, but there are people that are taking the opposite opinion, that for a multimodal experience, something like an audio input with a visual output has benefits in some cases, and they make compelling arguments.
Yeah. It really depends on who your audience is and what the experience is about.
I think that really does, nail it. And again, turn to your conversation designers, because they're the ones that should be on top of this research. That it really depends on exactly what your objective is with your overall design.
How would you think this scenario fits into this, topic that we have about multimodality? What about if I'm starting experience and I'm moving from device to device in that same conversation? I might start with, I don't know, my Echo Show 15, Family Hub, whatever you want to call it, info center at home. I might be on my mobile phone. I might have a device in my car. And, right now it's not really possible to carry that same conversation seamlessly from one point to the other.
I'm not sure how seamless it is or isn't. I know on the Google side, for example, you certainly used to be able to say, redirect this conversation to the mobile device. So you used to be able to say that, I'm honestly not sure if that feature is still there now that I think about it. But I think it's important, because there are certainly cases where you might be carrying on an audio only conversation and you want to be able to do something like show that to me.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. I think it's also important to be able to, if you're in your car and you've parked, to say, let's carry this on inside. So you don't have to keep sitting in your car.
Yeah. And some of the, I guess, features or how that's implemented now is, it can be seen in the conversation that I had recently with Eliza, and even with the Alexa send a phone feature, where you're hey, I'm on the voice experience, but I want to transfer this over to my mobile phone and I want to continue on with there. So or continue this, maybe I'm talking about something and I want to do a reorder and I send it to my phone, and maybe I want to change my order because it's easier to do it there and then send it off, but then get notifications back on my voice device, or
be able to ask questions about the order later from your voice device. So and I think that's something that, as we're developing, we need to keep in mind should be a feature. And that means, once again, this comes back to storing context, and how do we store context, and how do we make that context tieable to this person over between sessions?
Yeah.
But I think the notion of moving between modalities to whatever is the most appropriate modality at a time is one that we've really only begun to address.
I agree.
I think we can and should and will be doing that more and more.
Yeah, I think we'll see that as different things happen. And it's going to get interesting because then what do you do in like multiple device world? Should you be able to start a conversation with your Alexa and transfer it over to your Google Assistant or
Ooh,
to whatever custom assistant you have at work, or whatever it is?
that's a really good question. And broadly speaking, I would say yes. But also, carry on the conversation with my assistant and be able to go to my desktop perhaps and, supplement the information with whatever, with through my browser
Yep.
or through some other app. So, being able to use whatever resource is most appropriate for the task at hand. And sometimes that will be the assistant, and sometimes that will be an app, and sometimes that will be a web app.
Yep.
And sometimes that will be, an IoT device. Maybe it's my watch, maybe
Yep.
it's, my glasses. It will be whatever is the most appropriate thing for that task.
Yep.
And
Custom
that
made
can,
gadget. Yeah.
and that can change
Yeah.
from moment to moment. And I think that's really, as developers, the thing we need to start thinking about more is we don't need to be locked into a single modality anymore. We want to be able, we users, the people
Yeah.
using the stuff, want to be able to do what they want to do, no matter what is available to them.
Yeah, and we need to be able to dream of those possibilities and those connections, and in some cases keep pushing the boundaries to see what we can do to. I think that's where some of the uniqueness of voice plus whatever it is that we're doing is going to come out, is when we start thinking about, I'm not just sitting in front of my smart speaker, but like,
Right.
what am I doing, or what I want to do, or how would I want to stream this together with other experiences, or how can I complete this just one step further than what you're able to do
Yep.
currently?
Yep. And I think that's what we as developers like doing, are
Yeah.
pushing those boundaries and saying, well, what am I going to need to do that? And starting to build those things.
Yeah.
And there are some tools that are already there. But I think there's more that we need to build.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate JT for
raising the question. Yeah.
For raising the question. Yeah. And talking about it. And, our answer about this today might be, different in different ways, in a year from now or 2 years from now. Right. So we're just going to keep seeing how things evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope so too.
I hope so. But
I get a little bit too anxious to have things be available as a dev, or things to change faster. In some cases I'm like, this is going so slow.
I know. So if you are like JT and you have questions, you can reach out to us at Twitter, LinkedIn, join my office hours, or leave them in the comments below. Because we'd love to hear what your questions are and what your thoughts are on multimodality.
Yeah. Give us some examples, like, hey, this is a great multimodal experience that I've come across, or here's some ideas that I have. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll catch you on a further episode of Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, everybody. Have a good week. Have a good week, Mark.
Yep. Take care. Thank you.